Hi, everybody, and welcome to Future Proofing Your Business. 5 things you need to know about migrating your Atlassian tools to the cloud. So let me do a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, I'm Wayne Sadin, and I'm your host. And the housekeeping is, yes, we are recording. This is going to be a recorded session, and the recording will be shared following the live webinar. So don't worry, you don't have to be writing everything down. We'll be giving it to you later. We are going to have plenty of time for questions, and we'll be answering the questions at the end of the presentation. And I want to assure people, if we don't get to them all in the time we have allotted, we will make sure we answer them individually for folks. So don't be shy about asking questions. And use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask questions during the presentation. Oh, let's get going. First of all, I'm Wayne Sadin. I've got 30 years experience as a CIO across a number of industries. I've spent the last 10 years advising boards and C-suites on how to use technology for digital transformation, for digital optimization, for removing technical debt, and quite frankly, moving their operation into the cloud and other modern technologies. So I'm real excited about helping people with cloud migration, and I'm glad to be here today. Now let's start talking about to the other panelists. Ramisha, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ramisha Faison. I'm a partner solutions architect at AWS located in Arlington, Virginia. I specialize in onboarding partners into our partner network by ensuring that they're following the best practices, as well as providing various types of enablement to ensure they're able to continue their cloud journey.
Thank you, Ramisha. We'll be hearing from Ramisha a little later. Hey, Nick, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Wayne. Nick Nader here, solution engineer at Isos Technology. I work with our entire sales team in our pre-sales efforts to solution our products and services to all of our clients, which includes, of course, having conversations about migrations and how to get to the cloud and what you need to consider when you're moving to Atlassian's cloud. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Nick, and we'll be hearing a lot from Nick as this presentation goes on. Brendan, it's to you.
Hello, my name is Brendan Conrad. I'm a solutions engineer with Atlassian, and I'm based out of Los Angeles. I work as part of dedicated account teams, assisting customers interested in migrating to the Atlassian Cloud. I also specialize in helping customers with business process automation and digital transformation.
Thank you very much, Brendan. Again, we'll be hearing from Brendan quite a bit as this presentation goes on. So let's start with a poll. We want to ask you what you think. We have a poll that says, where is your organization on your cloud journey? Are you on-premise or data center first strategy? Have you chosen that I'm going to stay where I am? Are you starting your planning for migrating to the cloud? Have you moved some minor workloads, some little stuff into the cloud? Or are you a cloud first major workload in the cloud strategist where you're really advanced in this? So we'll give you a couple of minutes to think about that and respond. One choice is all we got. I want to tell you, we ran this on social media over the last couple of days. And I don't want to bias anybody, but we had an overwhelming majority in one of these categories. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where we are now. Oh, so by far, the winner is starting cloud migration planning. This is quite interesting. When we ran it on social media, a lot of people were in the cloud first strategy. Major workloads are in the cloud. Well, I'm really excited because this is the right time to be having this discussion with people. Hearing that everybody was already kind of far along scared me a little bit. What are you here to find out? But you're just the right spot to be hearing the kind of conversation we're about to have. And let's start by talking about the features and benefits of the Atlassian tools in the cloud. We're going to let Brendan start and give you the Atlassian overview of their cloud strategy.
Thank you, Wayne. I think traditionally Atlassian solutions have been associated with engineering teams, particularly software engineering. However, the Atlassian Cloud can empower any team, business analysts, knowledge workers, portfolio managers, data scientists, really practically everyone. Atlassian is a cloud-first organization with most of our research and development resources dedicated to the cloud. With Atlassian Cloud Solutions, you can manage and move your initiatives completely through their origins, from ideation to delivery and deployment into your production environment. With the Atlassian Cloud, you can respond to customer feature requests with Jira Service Management, commit to fulfilling requests and creatively dream about and organize new solution capabilities with Jira Product Discovery, create key objectives and insights across your portfolio with Jira Align, document and share compiled analysis, and collaborate in real time with Confluence, associate, understand, and manage dependencies between Jira Work Management and Jira Software, provide regular status updates for teams across your organization with Atlas, continuously test, deploy, and deliver with Bitbucket, and evaluate and measure activities in the cloud with Atlassian Analytics to drive more informed business decisions. Now, we're able to provide solutions like this because the Atlassian Cloud exists on a service-oriented architecture platform called Micros. And this network of microservices allows us to rapidly scale our solutions from improvement to responding to sudden traffic spikes. With on-premise solutions, one misconfiguration could bring down the entire application. And with cloud, a failure of one service will not bring down the entire system, and patches are more quickly and easily developed, tested, and deployed. The Atlassian Cloud also allows customers to create customized workflows that align with their business process and develop automated routines built with automation for both Jira and Confluence. Automating repetitive manual tasks will save you time and resources, allowing employees to focus on higher value activities. Leveraging our automation and workflow tools in cloud will improve data accuracy, provide consistent outcomes, assist with standardizing your processes, and make tracking and measuring performance easier. Lastly, one of our goals for customers migrating to the cloud is reducing the reliance on third-party tools and apps. While Atlassian offers an open and highly integrated framework, we hope our native functionality can reduce the number of apps you need to operate on the cloud, and doing so will reduce costs associated with licenses, integration, training, and maintenance.
Well, I just want to make a comment. When you hear that an organization is cloud first, understand what that means. This is not a collection of independent applications. This is an architecture that puts everything together. And so for those of you that have used Atlassian server products and products that run in your own data center, this is really a rethinking of the product suite that creates a tremendous number of new opportunities. Hey, Nick, why don't you talk about some of those things?
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. Here at ISOS, we like to talk about kind of like the popular cloud exclusive features. Obviously, there are a lot of benefits of the cloud overall, but just to add a little bit of color for specific products, Jira Service Management specifically has a lot of things new in the cloud that are exclusive to the cloud that the server and data center clients may not know of or receive currently on-prem. Over the past few years, Atlassian has really been trying to push Jira Service Management towards a true fleshed out enterprise service management product to compete with some of their larger competitors. And that's included acquisitions a few years ago, like Opsgenie for your operations teams, as well as kind of extending your incident management workflow and integrating with all of your monitoring tools natively. And then, of course, things like asset management with Insights Asset Management that they acquired about 1.5 years ago, which is, of course, going to be able to track all of your hardware and software configuration items. It's really a data modeling tool at its core. So we've actually used it for a plethora of different use cases that people may not actually initially expect out of an asset management tool as well. But they're pulling in quite a lot of things in this Jira Service Management space and tying them to the different license tiers within the cloud so that, hey, at the premium tier, you get all of the asset management functionality. Things like help for chatbotting. Nobody likes to leave Slack or Teams. They just want to do everything in one place. And the help chatbot allows you to do things like just toss a ticket emoji onto a message to create a Jira Service Management issue, as well as things that are up and coming like Percept AI, which is going to be a learning tool that learns over time and essentially acts as kind of like an automated knowledge base of sorts to answer the very, very common questions that come into your help desk teams. So a lot of very cool things that are attached to that Jira Service Management product exclusively in the cloud now. And then we don't like to, leave the dev teams, hanging. We don't get to talk about Bitbucket or Bamboo very often, but Bitbucket Cloud does have an exclusive feature called Bitbucket Pipelines that essentially replaces the CI/CD Bamboo tool that's on-prem and exclusively on-prem for your cloud deployment. So some very, very cool stuff that you can get only in the cloud in those Atlassian products.
That is very cool. It's great to hear that not only is this a re-architecture, but it's an extension of a set of products that people have used for a long time. Hey, Nick, you mentioned different tiers of the product. So let's spend a little time talking about those tiers. Maybe Brendan can walk us through the 3 tiers that are available to the paying customers and take a look at what you get for the different tiers.
Yeah, absolutely. Atlassian offers several tiers of cloud plans: standard, premium, and enterprise. And our customers that migrate to cloud really lean towards premium or enterprise just because of all of the features and capabilities that come with those 2 tiers. With cloud premium, customers will have unlimited storage, premium customer support, a 99.9% uptime SLA, and be able to leverage automation that I talked about earlier at both the project level and globally across all projects. For customers really wanting more of a federated approach, our enterprise plan allows for a multi-site cloud architecture with unlimited instances of Atlassian products at no additional charge. Our enterprise plan also includes our user provisioning layer, Atlassian Access, for free, enterprise customer support, and an upgraded, financially backed 99.95% uptime SLA.
I want to just emphasize, as a former CIO, that having a financially backed uptime SLA is terrific. Just think of the number of big companies that have had outages. And here's a company willing to put their money where their mouth is and say, we will make you whole if there is an outage. So I think that's a terrific thing and says a lot for the availability of the Atlassian Cloud product. So we've talked about some details of Atlassian because obviously that's the meat of this presentation, but we're going to talk a little bit about the cloud in general. Let's start by talking about why people move to the cloud. So let me give you my perspective as a consultant and a CIO. The first thing that everybody talks about is moving fixed cost to variable cost. It's like some kind of accounting magic. Instead of buying the capital assets, servers and storage and network, you can let Amazon do it and just pay for it by the drink, as they say. So I'm not an accountant, I'm not a CPA, but I do want to warn you that is not as clear cut as it used to be. Go talk to your CFO, go talk to your internal audit people, but there are ASU, accounting standards updates in the United States and equivalent around the world that say we can treat cloud costs and CapEx costs for internal data centers pretty much the same. So that's not as strong an argument as it used to be. But the argument that I will make is scalability, security, and availability. When you partner with AWS or other cloud providers, they are providing a layer of security, physical security around all of their data centers, their networks, security around the items you license from them. Now, it does not absolve you from security responsibility, but it does allow for a lot of things that you were having to worry about to be handled by a company that spends billions of dollars with a B on security. And of course, scalability and availability. You'll hear shortly, Amazon's got lots of regions, lots of data centers, hundreds of millions of devices, all ready for you when you need them. And here's a thing that people don't often talk about, but it's important to me. It's a concept called headroom. If you run a data center, a lot of you probably are involved in that, you run a lot of spare capacity. Maybe you have a bursty workload. Your work changes by the day of the month, by the time of the day if you're a restaurant company. The 10th of the month is a big deal in mortgages when late payment day comes. So you've got to allow headroom for your applications to expand. You got to allow for something to break. You got to allow unexpected testing you've got to do, or the auditors come and say, run a pilot for me. Let me see what you got there. So you run a lot of headroom. In a cloud environment, you don't need that. All of a sudden, when you need 5 servers for an hour, Amazon will make them available to you. Or when you need 500 servers available for 3 days a month, Amazon will make that available to you. So that is a tremendous way to say your cloud cost could be as much as 40% resource less than doing it on-prem. And also, you've got technical debt. And again, we've seen lots of things with airlines, with airline regulations, that technical debt has taken companies down. When you move things to the cloud, whether infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service, the technical debt is taken care of for you. Let me give you the example of Atlassian. If you're running Atlassian server products, you got your own servers, your own equipment, your own firmware and microcode, your own operating system. And then Atlassian happily sends you fixes and upgrades, and it's on you to put them in. In the Atlassian Cloud environment, all of that's taken care of for you. So you can focus on delivering value to your customers instead of building tools for other people in IT. And the last thing is in the cloud is easier tool adoption. When you sign up with, let's say, Amazon, you'll discover that they have a whole dashboard full of tools, whether they're databases, AI tools, IoT tools, and turning them on becomes a matter of clicking a few buttons and being willing to pay a little extra money. So it's much quicker to move into that environment. And that's why cloud makes a huge difference in how nimble, flexible, and cost-effective you can be in responding to the needs of your customers, the people who make money for the company. So now I've talked about the cloud in general. Let me let Misha talk about Amazon Web Services and their offering.
So AWS has been providing cloud services for over 15 years, and it has been continually expanding its services to support virtually any cloud workload. It now has more than 200 fully featured services for a variety of areas, including compute, storage, database, networking, analytics, machine learning and AI, IoT, and much more. AWS has a large global footprint, as mentioned. The AWS cloud spans 96 availability zones within 30 geographic regions across the world, with announced plans for about 15 more availability zones and 5 more AWS regions in Australia, Canada, Israel, New Zealand, and Thailand. You can replicate your infrastructure in any region in the world in minutes. Also, data stays in the region you place it in. We do not move your data, which is important in countries like Germany, where locality is essential to doing business. You can architect your applications to span availability zones, regions, and you can take advantage of both availability and low latency performance for users across the globe. As mentioned, security is our #1 priority, and the AWS cloud has been architected to be one of the most flexible and secure cloud environments available. We take care of security of the cloud. This is the actual physical infrastructure, the facilities, the actual compute and building blocks. But you as a customer, you take care of security in the cloud. This means you secure workloads and applications that you deploy onto the cloud. This also means that you have the flexibility to put more emphasis on security or sensitive data and adjust as needed in areas where you have less concern. AWS significantly allows more investment in security, police policing, and countermeasures than almost any large company can afford themselves. All customers inherit our best practices of policies, architecture, and processes that have been built to satisfy the needs of the most sensitive workloads.
Well, that's terrific. Obviously, Amazon creates a tremendous opportunity for us. And Atlassian, of course, has picked the Amazon cloud in which to run. So that says they've got quite a bit of investment in that, just like many of us would have. Let's get to another poll now and ask a question about the cloud. And that is, why hasn't your organization moved to the cloud if you haven't? Maybe you've got cost concerns. It's too expensive. Maybe you don't have executive buy-in. The case hasn't been made and they haven't said yes. You're worried about migration downtime. Loss of control. Do I really want somebody else doing things that I was doing in my own data center? Maybe the cloud doesn't give you the security, or you don't think it does give you the security you want. Functionality and added complexity. Maybe you're dealing with that. Or you're waiting for the Atlassian server end of life, which is in February of 2024. So these are multiple choice questions, and people can answer one or more. I'd love to see the answer from people, because this is a more complicated question, and quite frankly, will drive a lot of the conversation we want to have with you down the road. Let's see what the answer is. Okay, so it looks to me like the top answer is cost concerns about the cloud, and number 2 is functionality and complexity, followed by migration downtime, and they fall off pretty quickly from there. I do want to say cost concerns, they've been in the news quite a bit. I've done a lot of cloud migrations with companies as a CIO and as a consultant, and it's about managing how you use the cloud. What you don't want to do is create cloud sprawl where every developer can spin up 50 instances and leave them running. The cloud can be a very good unit price if you use it correctly. And I will tell you, a lot of people worried about the cost of cloud have never figured the headroom issue. I've seen this time and again. Don't think about, I've got 500 servers, I need 500 servers in AWS. If I have 500 servers, but only 400 of them are running production, maybe I don't need the other 200 or 100 or 200 all the time. So bear that in mind. There's a lot of issues around the cloud, that a lot of misinformation, and the people here, questions we can answer, and later discussion can help with a lot of those questions. Okay, we've talked about Atlassian products. We've talked about the cloud in general. Now we're going to talk about a high-level overview of cloud migration strategies and some of the challenges. And by the way, I'm seeing some of the questions in the queue, and I think we're going to be addressing a number of them here. And I promise if we don't do them in line, we'll get to them at the end. So Nick, why don't you start by talking about that from your perspective as a partner that helps companies migrate?
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. I'd love to start with the challenges, right? There's a lot of complexity to migrating to the cloud that not everybody is aware of when they first consider making the move. The cloud products of Atlassian's, product suite was built from the ground up. It's a completely different code base. And that, of course, adds a lot of complexity when you're migrating from a server product all the way to a different deployment that was written completely differently, right? And a huge portion of that complexity actually comes from their third-party applications. So each of those applications in the marketplace are written by a different vendor. And those vendors then have to rewrite their apps for the cloud, right? And that means they also have to provide migration paths for those apps to get the data from their server versions into their cloud versions. So we rely on the vendors in that regard. And some vendors have amazing, great migration paths that are very simple to run and they're completely automated. And others don't have migration paths at all. And some are completely manual, right? And it takes a lot of work for us to rewrite some of those third-party app scripts or data into the cloud for you. Now, another added complexity is, of course, any customizations that you have on your environment, right? So if you're integrating with third-party applications like Salesforce, like Zendesk, like pretty much anything out there, whether it's through the API or through a marketplace app, that's something that we might have to rewrite and recreate for the cloud, because the Jira Cloud API differs quite a lot from the Jira Server or Data Center API, of course. And then, of course, there are a lot of our clients that are looking to consolidate, or maybe have acquired a company that's already in the cloud or that's still on server. And they're like, hey, what do we do with this? Do we consolidate it into a single environment? Of course, creating a merge migration, which adds another layer of complexity, because if you think about it, you have names of statuses, workflows that are the same name, or custom fields that are the same name in both environments. And it's almost a negotiation, a discussion between teams to determine, which spelling of the to-do status do we actually keep from which environment, and then whose do we migrate, right? And we can spell to-do in 5,000 different ways, as everybody knows from administering Jira. So a lot of different layers of complexity, and oftentimes that means the timeline to get to the cloud is a lot longer than people originally guess it's going to be. It's not really a simple lift and shift that it is like going from server to data center. There's a lot of mapping and a lot of complexity to getting actually into that cloud deployment. Now, the second thing I wanted to talk about is ISOS's expertise with migrations. We have been at the forefront of Atlassian's cloud migrations. We participated in their Atlassian Himalayas program, which was essentially a invite-only program for their partners to come in and help tackle their largest migrations, but more importantly, also to provide feedback on the migration process to Atlassian so that they could improve it and we could optimize the way that we work together on our migrations. And this, helped us really push our process forward, but also helped Atlassian improve their tooling over the past few years. And ISOS has done, hundreds of migrations from on-prem environments into the cloud, including things that are very large data sets, upwards of 3 million issues in Jira environments, as well as some very large merge consolidation migrations where we're taking, 3 or 4 server environments and maybe merging it into an existing cloud environment for a large enterprise company. So we have a lot of experience in this domain. And we've also provided quite a lot of strategies and approaches and best practices because of our past experience And those strategies may be like a phased migration, depending on the client's priorities and concerns and needs. They might want to take, say, like a pilot team first, right? A lot of our clients say, hey, we've got a team that's ready to go to the cloud. Let's move them first. Let's test it out. Let's prove it out and make sure that the data of that team is actually properly functioning in the cloud before we move the rest of our business critical teams into the cloud. So we can always do it in a phased or staged approach. And then other clients will say, hey, we want to get it over with. Let's just do a big bang. Let's try to create as little disruption in that production environment that we have on server as possible. So let's just move everything over in a single cutover weekend, which we've been able to do for very, very large clients as well, which you'll hear in some of our success stories later on in the webinar. And then finally, of course, there are those merge consolidation ones that can be a little different, but once you get consolidated into a single cloud environment, it's going to ease administration, it's going to make governance much easier, and of course, it's going to give the stakeholders a large holistic view of their organization, right? It's very difficult to see data in nice reports across your organization when you're in 4, 5, 6 different environments on server and in cloud, like in a hybrid approach. And then, of course, everybody loves licensing cost savings. So, getting consolidated into a single environment, of course, saves you money there as well.
Wow, that's a lot of considerations. And I know you could probably drill down for another hour on details, having done so many. But I will say this, let me emphasize what Nick said. As a CIO, when you're doing a migration of an integrated suite of products, and that's what Atlassian is, it's really an enabling platform with their own and third-party add-ins. You've really got to rethink, how do I want to do business? How do I do business today? And as Nick said, maybe you have acquisitions in different groups and you've done business 10 different ways. How do you want to do business? So if you think of a project like this as a software migration, the classical lift and shift, you're going to lose so much value. As Nick said, you can standardize on the spelling of to do. You can standardize on processes. You can make it easier to move developers from one part of the organization to another, from one project to another. So please, if you're thinking about this as just a mechanical translation, take it up a level. Think about what you wish you could do better and differently. And that's where partners come in. They can say, this works, that doesn't work so good. This product works, this product you may want to think about a little bit. And that's where you can get a lot of benefit, right, Nick? You don't want to take this too low. You want to take this up as a business transformation project. Do you agree?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of our clients, see a migration as an opportunity, right? Like, obviously, it can be a headache and there's a lot of risk involved to a migration. But on the flip side, it's an opportunity, like you said, to optimize their process, right? Nobody has a perfect process. So it's a great way to say, hey, let's not take everything we have on our server environment. Let's leave behind those unnecessary configuration items. Let's think about the way our teams work and whether that we can consolidate some of our Jira projects or some of our third-party add-ons. And we have a lot of experience making those recommendations up front. We've got a lot of services in the beginning of all of our migrations. We have extensive discussions with your teams and your stakeholders to determine, hey, is there anything that we can clean up here? Is there any place that we can save you money in third-party applications? And so on and so forth. So a lot of opportunity there when you're making that migration to really transform the way you use the Atlassian toolset as well.
That's a key word, transform. Think of this as transformational, not just optimizing tools. Hey, Brendan, why don't you take us to the Atlassian view? You are the vendor. What's your role? What's your company's role in this?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that I don't want to say it's necessarily a challenge for migrating to cloud, but one of the things that our customers often run into is resources in terms of what is Atlassian bringing to the migration project versus a solutions partner. So the first thing that I would definitely consider is leaning on your dedicated Atlassian account team. As part of that account team, you'll get a solutions engineer, just like me, as part of that team. And what we do is we provide more of a hands-off consultation and project management. And we'll offer guidance and best practices to help you prepare for your cloud migration journey. And we rely on heavily on solutions partners such as ISO's technology to execute the hands-on tasks related to your migration. And we highly recommend using a solutions partner to ensure your data arrives as you would expect, with as much of your localized Atlassian product customization workflows reimagined in the cloud. Atlassian will work with you to understand your business requirements and make a recommendation on the most appropriate cloud tier for your organization. With the poll results, we saw that the number one reason for potentially not migrating would be cost or an understanding of costs. And this is where your Atlassian account team can really play a vital role in your planning phase. We will help you understand your total cost of ownership and return on investment planning by choosing to migrate to the Atlassian Cloud, and we'll provide analysis for you and work with you to help really understand TCO and ROI thoroughly. Lastly, as Nick mentioned, in terms of blockers with customization and apps, we'll go through your inventory and help you evaluate what you're using in terms of apps and customization to see if there's a way that we can consolidate and remove that reliance on those third-party apps. And then also look at any other requirements that you may have related to data security and compliance. And Atlassian's role really in the planning phase is to make sure that you have a very clear runway to cloud. And so I would definitely recommend, while working with solutions partners, still lean heavily on your Atlassian account team.
Absolutely. You're paying for it. You might as well use it, right?
Exactly.
Again, let me throw in a comment as a CIO here. I've heard both Nick and Brendan talk about third-party add-ins and evaluating them. Look, when you start licensing a product, you're an Atlassian customer, you've been a customer for 10 years, 20 years, the tools have evolved. Over the years, the tools have gotten a lot more capabilities, and now moving into the cloud, the architecture is changing, and additional capabilities are coming in. So whatever decision you made 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you're probably living with that because people don't like to change. We in IT are really no different. We like to change other people, but not ourselves. So here's an opportunity to say, what third-party tools don't I need? Now, I have nothing against third-party tools, but fewer throats to choke is a great thing, fewer vendors to deal with, and obviously cost matters. So a simpler interface, simpler support structure, and lower cost become a win-win-win for the customer. So I think we ought to be looking at that very heavily when we talk about migration. And this conversation was about obstacles and about high level. Let's talk about best practices. Now we're going to get down a little more detailed and say it's not all challenge. There are best practices. And I do want to say to people, as an aside, I'm seeing a number of questions come in. This is terrific. Keep them coming. Some of them are being answered, I think, as we go. Others will be answered at the end. So don't worry. We'll make sure that you get your issues addressed. So we're talking about best practices. Nick, we want to start with you. And what are the things that you and your team at ISOS can do for the company, for the customers?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Wayne. When it comes to your first step into migrating to the cloud, I think that determining whether you're ready to move to the cloud and then also determining how complex the move is going to be is probably a great place to start, right? And our pre-sales effort does exactly that, right? We like to have those conversations up front, and we have a couple of options for you to figure out more about your environment and more about the potential complexity of your migration, right? One of those things is our cloud readiness analyzer, which is a free app on the marketplace that you can actually install onto your data center and server environments for free. And then it's a one-button run, and what it does is it spits out some more detailed issue statistics. So things like, duplicate custom fields, unused workflows. It even actually delves into the usage of your third-party apps. So things like Script Runner, JSU Automation, JMWE, those really heavy hitters. Any of the test case management apps that people use, like X-Ray is a lot of effort getting into the cloud. Test rails, things like that have a lot of data stored within them. So it'll spit out statistics around how you use that. And as everybody that's tried it knows, Script Runner isn't exactly the same in the cloud, right? You might lose some of that functionality, or we might have to move some of that functionality somewhere else. So this is going to show you kind of a whole report of how ready you are to move into the cloud based off of a lot of those metrics. And it'll even give you a score from like 1 to 5, basically saying, hey, if you're at a 3, you can probably move to the cloud, but it might have some complexity to it. If you're at a 5, why aren't you in the cloud already, right? Like, it's going to be a nice, simple move, and it's going to give you a lot of benefit, and your data is nice and clean and ready to go into the cloud. So definitely check that out on the marketplace. And it's something that we like to leverage in our pre-sales effort, because you can just click a button to download it, and it'll actually email it straight to us so that we can review those metrics of your environment and give you a more accurate level of effort for a migration. Now, if you're a large enterprise, we kind of have a scaled up version of that. We have a service for cloud readiness assessments, right? Where we'll dig really deep around your priorities, your concerns. Like Brendan said earlier, like a lot of people have compliance concerns, security concerns. We will essentially do a full security review for you as part of that cloud readiness assessment, right? We'll dig into your app usage and say, hey, you have 25 script runner behaviors, but we may be able to create a custom Atlassian Forge solution in the cloud to replace those because they're not quite there in the cloud quite yet. So a lot of stuff coming out of that cloud readiness assessment, and it's just a small fixed fee up front that tends to feed into a much more accurate SOW on the back end of that. So we get a lot of information out of that. Now, like you said earlier, a lot of clients take the opportunity to transform their process when they're moving to the cloud, right? Nobody's process is perfect, like I mentioned before. So this is when we have conversations around, hey, what can we clean up in our environment, right? The cloud readiness assessment will give you a list of things that you can get rid of, things that you may not need, and we'll have those discussions with your team to determine things that we can leave behind. You know, oftentimes our clients won't bring all of their data into the cloud, right? Like they've been on server for 12 years and they have historical data for 12 years. You probably don't need all of that in your cloud environment. The nice part is you can always keep that in server, export it, use it in Power BI or Tableau or whatever your preferred business intelligence reporting tool is. And we can only move the most active data or maybe like the last year of data and, you know, potentially cut down on cost and complexity of that migration. A lot of the times what we like to do with our clients as well is assess the business criticality of a lot of their functionality, right? So is script runner business critical? Is JSU automation business critical? You know, do we actually want to move every app that you have on server into the cloud, or can we consolidate and can we cut costs by essentially getting rid of some of those apps that you may not actually be using across the organization? So all that stuff happens up front. And, you know, when it comes to preparing for the migration to the cloud, you definitely want to get started early, right? Like I mentioned before, the time to get migrated can be a lot longer than people expect. If you go to Atlassian's website, you know, it'll say somewhere between 6 and 12 months to migrate. Now, not all migrations are that long, but if you are a large organization, it could well get into that year-long migration period. So coming to a partner early helps with preparing for that. It helps also with determining whether a transformation of the way you work is also a potential possibility when you're moving to the cloud, right? So we uncover those opportunities. And of course, that's a lot to consider. So definitely reach out earlier rather than later. And we will, you know, share all of our expertise and our best practices with you. That way we don't start to stumble and fall when we get into that migration phase.
That's a lot of opportunities for help, and that's the result of hundreds of migrations, I guess. Hey, Brendan, again, we got to give you a chance. Atlassian has its resources. What are the best practices from the Atlassian perspective when you're merging instances and migrating to the cloud?
Right. And that's it right there. It's take advantage of those resources. And I think that that's something else that's a little misunderstood as far as solutions partner Atlassian. Atlassian makes additional resources available to you as part of the cloud migration effort. What will happen is through our planning phase, once we get to a point where you are ready to engage on your cloud migration, eligible customers will then have a cloud migrations manager who will help project manage the cloud migration effort with you alongside a solutions partner. And we also have behind the cloud migrations manager, a dedicated team of cloud migration support engineers, and they can work directly with you, with solutions partners to help resolve any technical issues related to your cloud migration. And there was one other point that I just wanted to kind of just emphasize. Both Wayne and Nick have touched on this, but really migrating to the cloud shouldn't really be thought of as a chore or something you have to do. It really needs to be part of your digital transformation. So in terms of best practices, it's really kind of approaching the project of cloud migration with kind of an open-minded approach, like being willing to embrace not only just what a SaaS solution can provide, but also what are the differences between the Atlassian Cloud and an on-prem solution in terms of what features we have, new products, new solutions. And so when we're talking about the different strategies for migrating to cloud in terms of lift and ship, optimize and shift, and so forth, it's really an opportunity for us at Atlassian to work with you to figure out what can we optimize, what can we consolidate, and really be part of that planning. So again, just take advantage of all of the resources that we're making available to you.
Yeah, there's quite a few. Thank you for that, Brendan. Hey, last poll. I promise you, we're putting you to work, but it's the last time. So this is a question of when do you bring in your vendors or partners into the planning process? Do you bring them in at the start before you choose a strategy? Early, after you've kind of said, this is the way we're going, let's get somebody to help us. The third strategy is called repair. Oops, we got to do it again. And then never. We just do it in-house. We like our own way of doing it, and we don't need no help from either the people we're paying for the software or for partners that have done it hundreds of times. So single answer, please. And I'm very curious to see, because I'll tell you what, I always like to bring experts in if I don't know how to do something. So let's see. At the start is by far the number one answer, 67%. And that is, I'll give you my objective opinion. That's what you ought to be doing. Ask the questions. You don't even have to hire them, but at least get them involved. Now, we've talked about the high level. We've talked about some best practices. Let's talk about some real world outcomes. Let's get some examples from Nick, and Brendan, you'll be able to fill in after. Nick, give us some examples of customers that have gone well.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. Maybe I can convince that one person that said they'll never bring in a partner here with some of our stories. So, the first client that I want to talk about, we did a migration for a client named Migrate, and they're essentially the world's largest independent, sell-side platform, which essentially means they provide technology to streamline your purchase of digital advertising, right? And so they were undergoing extremely rapid organic growth, as well as through mergers and acquisitions of other smaller companies. And this kind of caused the lack of visibility across their siloed departments. They had, I think, 3 server environments and 1 cloud instance. So they were onboarding users into multiple environments, essentially doubling up on licensing costs for a lot of their users, sometimes tripling up on those licensing costs. So what ISOS did is we went in and we met with the administrators of each environment and tried to determine, hey, what's the best way we can work together between all the teams that are siloed in these different environments, and what's the best way for us to administer it, in a consolidated format. So what's easiest for those administrators, right? And what we ended on was, consolidating onto a single new cloud environment. And we were even able to squeeze them into only a single weekend cutover, right? So as little disruption as possible. We don't like to hold up, 4 different production environments on 4 different separate weekends, merging them in one by one. So we took them all and put them all on a temporary node and cut them all over at the same time, which is exactly what the client wanted. And we were even able to finish that migration with several weeks to spare, right? So we kind of came under our more conservative estimate there. And Migrate benefited from this because they had those now streamlined workflows for their cross-functional teams, right? They weren't all siloed in 4 environments. They can actually have that cross-project global automation that Brendan talked about, working in one single enterprise cloud environment. The stakeholders got a holistic view of their entire organization, so they were able to report on that data in one space instead of trying to pull it all into Tableau and having to hire 4 SQL engineers to do so, because that's what it takes to handle Tableau. And then, of course, easier administration for all those administrators, right? We created a governance plan for the administrators to handle that single enterprise cloud environment. And Atlassian Access helped with that quite a lot, right? Because it's a single place to do all of that billing, all of that administration, roles, permissioning, and it, of course, ties into the SSO providers as well. So that was a great success, and that was one of our bigger consolidation efforts. Now, the other client I wanted to talk about was essentially a rescue mission. It's a client named Avalara, and they're a SaaS company that essentially provides software to help companies become tax compliant. They've got like over 3,000 employees in 95 countries. Their instance was nearly 3 million Jira issues, and it was loaded with customizations, integrations, very, very heavy third-party app usage. So it was one of the largest migrations that Isos and Atlassian have done to date. And Avalara also had a requirement of a very short timeline, right? They needed to complete this before deadline. And they had previously, like I mentioned, failed to migrate to the cloud 2 times already. So they went to Atlassian, and Atlassian basically came to us and said, come go to Isos, they'll help you rescue that migration and get you guys into the cloud. And Avalara, of course, was really going for the cloud because they saw the benefit in the enterprise cloud opportunity. And they had kind of 2 large portions of their organization on data center. They had their entire engineering department and all of their business teams on data center. So it was kind of split into these 2 camps. So what we decided to do is we came up with a strategy to do a phased migration for them, where we took all of their engineering teams first, and then their business teams in a phase 2. So kind of like that staged method of approaching the migration there. And, Isos, we basically had to utilize some proprietary migration tooling. We had to rewrite, I think, like 80, 90 different complex workflows for them once they got into the cloud. And we had to completely re-engineer an integration, a business critical integration with their Salesforce platform as well. And because Avalara had SLAs with their clients to adhere to as well, the downtime window for that had to be very, very small. So we worked with Atlassian, and we actually figured out a way to get the tooling to load the data, which was originally going to be about 24 hours of load time, into a nice 6-hour window, which is the only reason we were enabled to do that cutover in a single weekend. So testimony to Atlassian's cloud migration team. And of course, that Himalayas program helped us kind of optimize that process with Atlassian's tool set. To enable us to get Avalara there in time and with as little disruption to their teams as possible. So Avalara is one of those clients that saw this as a really, really good opportunity to standardize their process. So we did some transformation during that process. We consolidate a lot of their third-party apps that they were using to either native cloud functionality or just a single app instead of several doing a similar type of functionality. And we cleaned up a lot of that data because they did have a lot of historicals and they didn't need all of that in the cloud. So, during that move, we were pretty much able to overhaul and all of their governance, all of their administration, and do that consolidation to save them some licensing costs. So it was a great win for Atlassian. It was a great win for Isos, and Avalara is now happy. And the nice part is Magnite and Avalara both helped us write white papers about those migrations. So you can read kind of the full stories of those on our website as well.
Those are very cool stories. And I will say, I know Avalara as a customer of theirs, and they have a very complex piece of software. So I'm glad to hear that you helped them do a better job of creating and deploying it, because tax software is very complicated. Hey, Brendan, why don't you give us the Atlassian perspective on that briefly?
Yeah, sure. Those were a couple of really strong case studies, so I don't necessarily want to top those. We have a number of additional customer stories on Atlassian.com, Atlassian.com/customers, if you'd like to read additional stories of customers, both great enterprise scale and small, that have migrated. I just wanted to read one quick quote, if you don't mind. This is from a VP of Innovation and Development Transformation that said, "When you have lines of business across the world, it's a beast to organize our work. Having one system of record that works across all of those is invaluable. And without that, you don't have the speed to deliver." So I thought that was really interesting. We're talking about a global organization that migrated to the Atlassian Cloud and consolidated, as we've been talking about throughout this webinar. And they were able to create a system of record with Atlassian that really drove innovation.
That's a wonderful quote and great story. So let me tell everybody and remind you that you're getting these slides and this presentation after we finish talking, so nobody has to write anything down. But there is a wealth of information between Isos and Atlassian. Here's a few examples of things: the demystification of the Atlassian Cloud, some case studies that we already talked about, and then we've got another slide that shows you how to look for more information. A blog post that I wrote, and then something from Amazon about Amazon Web Services. This is all going to be in material that will be provided to you. And that brings us to the most interesting part of the presentation, the questions and answers. And so without further ado, I'll just go to the first one. what is the Atlassian recommended solution for a single data center deployment to multi-cloud staged migration while keeping links between issues working? Nick, do you want to try that one?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this one, Wayne. So if I'm understanding correctly, we'd be moving from a data center deployment that's a single site into multiple cloud environments. Now, I can only assume that they mean federated environments, which is, at the enterprise tier of the cloud license. This is actually kind of the opposite of what we see most common, right? Like most commonly will have multiple sites that want to be consolidated into a single one. This is the inverse. We have one site that then wants to split into multiple federated environments, maybe for security reasons, maybe because it can save on licensing costs, potentially because, not every team in the cloud needs every third-party app for the entire organization. So it could save on licensing as well. So what we usually do here is we'll recreate that linking once we get to that federated cloud environment, right? So oftentimes to save money, we'll do a single data center environment move to, so a normal ground to cloud process to a single cloud environment. And then once in the cloud, split into the federated model into a handful of other environments. Now, the licensing is the trickiest part here, but the nice part at ISOS is we have an entire licensing team, and I don't have to handle any of the licensing side of things. They're essentially your licensing team when you use our services. So they kind of figure out, hey, which third-party add-ons go with which federated URL? How do we save on the most cost in that regard? So the process isn't too different. We would move into a single cloud and then split from there. But the split is where it gets a little tricky, and we sometimes leverage things like Configuration Manager for Jira as an example, an add-on on the marketplace by AppFire to help with splitting up that different project stuff. It can also be done in the intermediary while we're doing the move, but it kind of depends on the client's appetite for downtime and disruption to the production teams.
Okay, that's great. And I will say with these answers, as Nick said, he's trying to figure out from a quick question what you're really getting at. I'm sure that Atlassian and ISOS are available for discussions if you want to talk about a specific situation, of course. So another question along the same line, but a little different, is when is a big bang migration approach more viable than doing it by organization or project and space? Nick, I'll give you this one. Brendan, don't worry, we got some for you, but Nick, why don't you try this one as well?
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. And Brendan, feel free to jump in if you have an opinion on this as well. But, big bangs are nice for as little disruption as possible, right? So if we want to piecemeal a migration, we'll typically leverage a tool that splits it up by either project or team or department, and then we move from there. But the big bang is less disruptive because we don't have to spend as much time on that server production environment, moving it to the intermediary, splitting it up, and then moving it to the cloud one by one. The other thing that you have to consider, or factor you have to consider there, is if we do split up the data, so take a single project first, test it out, prove it, and then move other ones, everything after that first move becomes a merge, right? We're no longer moving into a greenfield cloud environment, and it adds a bit of complexity, right? Because there can be some collision there of Jira configuration items. So the big bang is usually for those organizations that either have a very small tech window, want to get there very quickly, or don't have any requirements that would then kind of force us into that staged or phased approach.
Okay. Yeah, there's risk either way. It just depends on the exact situation. I've done many of these analyses for lots of migrations, and the answer really gets down to lists of detailed questions. But that was a great overall answer. Hey, Brendan, I'm going to throw one to you. Are isolated cloud environment solutions available for businesses with strict data handling requirements? I presume this may be federal government or geographic or other kinds of restrictions.
Yeah, I think that's where I would say, again, lean on your account team. We have dedicated account teams specifically for any sort of government or federal compliance related regulatory requirement type of accounts. And so our account teams can best guide those in terms of where they would be appropriately sitting in the cloud.
Okay. And again, like everything else, it's going to depend on your specific situation, right? Yep. Now we're getting into very technical answers, and obviously you don't want to run afoul of regulators, so we have to be very accurate when we pose the question and give the answer. Next question: When will the cloud match server/data center feature availability? For example, Java and the REST APIs, no manageable rate limits, etc. Brendan, you want to take a stab at that first?
Sure. And again, I think because of the architecture differences, it's never going to match one-to-one. On our Atlassian developer portal, you can definitely check out more information as far as how to best work around any rate limitations. And then also understand too, with our different cloud tiers, if you reference back what you would get with standard, premium versus enterprise, you do have limitations within standard, and as you move to premium and enterprise, in terms of, for example, the number of automations that can occur within your environment, that definitely opens up as you increase your tier.
Thank you. Okay, I just want to let everybody know we got about 4 minutes left to be respectful of time, and it's still a bunch of questions. So we're going to answer this kind of like lightning round. Next one is, may I get a copy of Brendan's script? It would be a perfect resource to push our CTO. Anything we presented here will be available. I'm sure Brendan's available. Take a look at the stuff I've written on accelerationeconomy.com. We got lots of material to help you. The next one is, do we have Cloud Readiness Analyzer for Confluence? Brendan?
Yeah, so
no, Nick, you want to do it?
Might be targeted at me. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
So ISO specific app, Cloud Readiness Analyzer, specifically for Jira, exclusively for Jira, and that's simply because Confluence tends to be much more simple, right? We don't see a lot of customizations or third-party apps that have issues migrating to the cloud. So we haven't had a need for a Confluence Cloud Readiness Analyzer, but we will dig into your cloud Confluence environment. We'll take a system information page and move from there, but we don't run into major issues with Confluence.
I think Nick is saying the readiness analyzer is Nick.
That's right.
Nick, a few times you mentioned a large organization. What's your definition? We have about 800 users.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, and the next one kind of touches on that, right? Like the 1,000 user point is a large cutoff. I would say 800 is obviously pushing that. So it's definitely on kind of the larger size of our medium migrations, right? So I think Atlassian's being a little optimistic when they say that anyone can handle a migration that's under 1,000 users. Like there's a lot more factors that go into migration complexity than your user count, right? It's a single metric. User collision is an issue, but there can be a plethora of customizations, third-party integrations, heavy script runner usage, et cetera, on environments that are much less than 1,000 users. Like dev teams that are 10 people have completely destroyed Jira Server to the point where we need to like recreate all of these customizations that they've created once we get to the cloud. So I would say it's the prudent approach is to at least come to us and let us determine how complex your migration is. Let us give you a quote. And then if it does look easy, if we say, hey, this is pretty lightweight, you can definitely go try it on your own. I will just caution you, I've never had a client come back and say, you know, our migration went great. We did it in-house. Our resources killed it. More often than not, we actually come in and have to rescue once our clients attempt it once and, you know, aren't able to do it they try to save costs, but I mean, in the long run, they usually come back to us anyways.
Okay, I'm going to skip to the next one that's similar. Can I install Cloud Readiness Analyzer for Jira Server, not Data Center?
Yes. So you will see on the marketplace that it's only listed for data center, and that's simply because you can no longer list server apps on the marketplace. You should still be able to install it on your server environment. If you're having issues with that, definitely talk to us because we can just give you the file and you can upload it as an app because there's a place to upload the app as well. So we can definitely get it on there, and it's part of our pre-sales process. So if you talk to me or one of our sales reps, we're able to hand you that file and you can upload it manually as well.
Okay, thank you. I see it at the top of the hour. I'm sure people have other things to do. So I will just say we've got a number of questions left. And we're going to stop at this point. I want to let everybody know that the next webinar, March 29th at 10 Pacific time, is how to expertly evaluate ITSM tools for your organization. We hope you'll join us there. I'll remind everybody that stuff is going to be available. And if you have questions, which we have, we will get them answered and get the answers back to you. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, panelists.